And a very warm welcome to Planet America's Fireside Chat. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Ciadello.
This week has erosion in US political support for Ukraine given Russia the upper hand.
And a whole heap of campaign news to chat about, from Trump's trials to that Reich video. But first...
In a boost for Donald Trump, he's won over the support of his former Republican presidential rival Nikki Haley. Speaking publicly for the first time since suspending her campaign back in March, the former South Carolina governor was tepid in her backing of Trump, but highlighted his positions on foreign policy, border security, immigration and debt reduction.
Trump has not been perfect on these policies. I've made that clear many, many times. But Biden has been a catastrophe. So I will be voting for Trump. Having said that, I stand by what I said in my suspension speech. Trump would be smart to reach out to the millions of people who voted for me and continue to support me, and not assume that they're just going to be with him. And I genuinely hope he does that.
And Haley backing Trump over Biden will potentially do that, even if some have suggested that Haley saying that she's voting for Trump isn't quite the same as a formal endorsement, but maybe that is coming too, because this probably does get Nikki Haley a coveted speaking slot at the Republican convention in July, and maybe it also gives her another shot at the presidency in 4 years from now. Was this just overtly sort of cynical politicking from Nikki Haley? Was it about self-preservation? Why has she done this and why has she done it now?
If I'm being real cynical, I'd say that it's promoting the Hudson Institute, who is currently paying her checks.
Oh yeah, she just took a job there, right?
Yeah, and so she just spread a viral news story for them.
How credible is it, though, when you know, back in January, at the height of the Republican primary campaign, she was saying Donald Trump is unhinged, unfit to be president. He was not fit to even hold a driver's license, much less be president. Now she says, well, he's not been perfect, but he's got my vote.
Well, look, she's a Republican. She's going to vote for Republicans. I don't think that's surprising. I think I can understand why a Republican would support the Republican over a Democrat. Yeah. What I do find interesting, though, is the fact that there is no real cacophony demanding that she deliver a real endorsement of Trump. If I take you back in time 8 years to Ted Cruz, weekly at this point in time, at the end of May, people were saying, when's Ted Cruz going to endorse Trump? When's he's got to drop out and endorse him formally. That went all the way to the convention. Ted Cruz was hassled and harassed about endorsing Donald Trump. He didn't give a ringing enough endorsement at the convention, and it followed him after that as well. Why did they care about Ted Cruz and they don't care about Haley? Even as we speak, Indiana, the primary was last week. She still got 22% of the vote. Why don't they care about that 22% of the vote?
I guess the answer is in May 2016, it looked like Donald Trump was, as Ted Cruz predicted, going to lose by 10 points. Because he was that far behind.
Exactly.
Right.
Back in 2016, they thought they needed that endorsement. Now, they don't think it matters. What this says to me, the fact they don't care about Nikki Haley's endorsement, is they reckon they're home. I reckon this says a lot about the mentality of MAGA land, that they think that they've got this election in the bag, so they need to care about Nikki Haley. So maybe they're cocky, maybe they're not, but maybe they're right. But the fact is, this says something about the psychology of the Trump campaign that I think they're feeling pretty confident right now.
Well, looking at the polls right now and looking at how he outperformed his polls in both of those elections, you can see why there'd be reason for it. But also, if they look at their history, most American elections, certainly in the last quarter century, have been very, very close. A few hundred votes decided 2000, 120,000 votes in 2004, 42,000 votes in 2016, 72,000 votes in 2020. Can they really afford to say to 20, 30,000 Haley voters in some of these swing states, don't worry, we'll be fine without you. You go vote for Joe Biden or do whatever you like. Well, that's pretty hubristic, I would suggest at this point.
Yeah, I'd be
He's
going
not leading
for
by that much.
No, I'd be going for those voters too. I'm just saying that this is a sign.
We'll see. The Trump campaign, though, has been embroiled in another social media controversy this week. This time, Trump's Truth Social account sent out a video containing some language that many people associate with Nazi Germany.
What happens after Donald Trump wins? What's next for America? The economy booms. American energy is unleashed and an end to crushing taxes. The border is closed and the largest deportation in history is underway. No more wars as we focus on home. Law and order is restored. The American dream is back and the best is yet to come. Make America great again.
If you're looking at that and scratching your head and thinking, what's so Nazi about that? I mean, we're obviously not talking about images of Nuremberg rallies and concentration camps here. But if you take a closer look at the text in those imaginary newspaper headlines, it does reveal some references that many people have found rather troubling.
Former President Donald Trump sparking backlash this morning after a video posted to his social media account seemingly suggests there will be a unified Reich if he wins the 2024 election.
Unified Reich. Well, President Biden took to social media to condemn that post.
Is this on his official account? Wow. A unified Reich? That's Hitler's language. That's not America's. He cares about holding on to power. I care about you.
Well, the Trump campaign was quick to try and distance themselves from that video, while admittedly taking several hours to take it down from his account.
This was not a campaign video. It was created by a random account online and reposted by a staffer who clearly did not see the word while the president was in court.
Now, it certainly is possible whoever reposted the video on Trump's account while he was in court didn't see the word Reich or other problematic language that was in some of the text there, referring to globalists, which can be very much an anti-Semitic slur. And it's also possible that the creator of the video itself didn't even look at it that closely, because if they really wanted to pander to Nazi supporters of Trump, they probably stuffed that up as well. Because in fact, they were pandering to fans of 19th century German reunification. The text says German industrial strength significantly increased after 1871, driven by the creation of a unified Reich. So it is not referencing the Nazi Third Reich, although Hitler was undoubtedly a fan of Otto von Bismarck's Second Reich. Hitler wasn't born in 1871. Although also to say that this is from a random account online, that's not exactly true either. This was from the same meme team that's produced a bunch of other videos that Trump has very gladly reposted, including that weird God made Trump video we showed you a few months ago, and others as well that have certainly dabbled in extreme right language, just as Trump has, of course, obviously, in some speeches. He's called immigrants vermin and journalists enemies of the people. So there is a context here, no doubt. And according to the New York Times, this particular meme group in fact has close ties to Donald Trump. He not only frequently reposts their content and praise their efforts on numerous occasions, but there are reports as well that Trump has called them up and said, hey, you should put in this bit from a Biden speech. You could do this, you could do that. So they're clearly loose collaborators, even if they're not in partnership.
Yeah, actually, there's an interesting story in those people, because this is a whole new model of producing content, because they aren't part of the Trump campaign. That's true officially, but at the same time, you're right. There is a really blurry line where the Trump campaign does talk to them, and the Biden campaign is trying to emulate this right now. They're trying to start their own meme team. So this might be the future. But let's leave that aside for now. On this story, if Joe Biden is expecting us to believe that he's just looking at this video and he's seen the unified Reich and he's going, oh no, that's terrible. He would need the world's biggest magnifying glass to see that. He is so small. Okay, that is. But anyway, but okay, let me answer your point, and I'll answer it by saying this: where do we think this came from? Do we think that someone sat down and typed in a unified Reich because they want to make some crypto point about Germans and therefore Nazis? No. I'll tell you where it came from. It came from a template program. I found it. It's right there. Have a look. Anyone can download this template and can load up whatever headlines they like, just where those headlines are. You just saw the unified Reich bit just then. You probably didn't notice the words because they're so small. Anyone can use this. Do you think I'm making that up? I'm not. I'll give you an example. Candy Staton, the 70s disco diva, put out a lyric video a couple of weeks ago. Have a look at it.
Lord, Lord, Lord. Oh, Lord, have mercy.
So you're saying Candy Staton's a Nazi?
Well, that's what we must conclude. She must be a crypto Nazi.
So this is just something that you can freely use online if you're making a cheap video, whether it's a Trump meme team or whether it's a pop star, they can just access this thing.
Exactly. And look, to be fair to Joe Biden's team, I expect them to jump on this kind of thing. Their entire strategy is to keep Trump in the news, keep the focus on him, make it about him, make him scary, make him seem out of control, and to ramp up the fear. That's their strategy. So you should expect Joe Biden to jump on this kind of stuff. What I don't expect is I don't expect the same thing from the media. I think that this kind of thing is unacceptable.
Former president is under fire for a video he posted on social media that used language from Nazi Germany. The latest in a series of anti-Semitic and authoritarian statements from Trump and his campaign.
It's not from Nazi Germany, it's not anti-Semitic, and it's not authoritarian. I expect more from ABC News than that. That is disinformation times 3, as far as I'm concerned.
Whether Trump knows that he is echoing the language of Nazism or extremism, one argument is to say, well, if you're employing the same tactics, dehumanising people using words like vermin, for instance, he may not know the historical context of that, but if you are, without even being aware of it, parroting extremists, Hitler, Mussolini, whoever it might be, you've got a problem right there.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why when he said the vermin thing, I criticised him for it.
But you're saying overreaction here, even though people will say, well, that template, you can change the words in that template.
You can't change the background.
Yeah, right. So you can change the headlines,
Yeah.
but not the text in the newspaper stories.
Yeah.
So that's built into it.
Yes.
These words off Wikipedia about German industrialisation in the 1870s.
Exactly. Having said that, there is a very interesting story that's orthogonal to this, which I'm not going to go into too much detail now because we don't have the time, but we should talk...
Explain orthogonal first of all.
we should talk about this at another time, but I just want to just flag, the person who put that up was not a junior staffer like Trump said. Well, maybe technically a junior staffer, but actually she might be the most important person other than Trump in the next Trump administration. Her name is Natalie Harp, and Mark Caputo wrote about this in The Bulwark this week. She's become Trump's eyes and ears. He used to search the internet on his phone and scroll around for viral content like that. Now he doesn't use his phone anymore, apparently. Now she's his printer. We've seen her in the court printing out stuff for Trump to read in the court. Apparently she does that all the time now.
He looks at the internet on paper now.
Yes,
yeah.
And she is the printer. She decides what he is going to see. She is his eyes and ears to the world. And also, apparently, she's starting to tweet for him as well. She is the person who tweeted out that video while he was in court. And so she is now becoming his mouth. She could be the most important person that no one's heard of. And it's a little bit scary that he is now inside a bubble created by some random 32-year-old, a Liberty University graduate who's just a One American news reader for a couple of years, and he liked the look of her. Now she is incredibly important, and this is one of the side effects of that.
So when you've got amateurs, unregulated, not even a part of the Trump campaign, creating
they don't
content,
control her.
right? And so we've got amateur content creators, amateur disseminators of this information using Trump's account, and yet whether you think that the extremist language was deliberate or not, and whether the reaction is proportionate to use of Reich and globalist and peace through strength, which yes, it was a German phrase in the days of Paul von Hindenburg.
Yes.
It's also a phrase under Ronald Reagan, for that matter, and I think Dennis Kucinich might have used it. So a bunch of people have used that, but. There is a broader issue here, which is the fact that there is no accountability, and people that may be completely ignorant of the history and the danger and the power of some of these words are just sending it all out there. It's like, oh, that sounds good. That's a pithy phrase.
Yeah, that is a problem. And it might not have been an issue this time, but it might be an issue next time.
Okay, now speaking of problems with language, President Joe Biden.
Yeah, and he's had a few. You might have seen this clip that went kind of semi-viral this week.
And when I was vice president, things were kind of bad during the pandemic. And what happened was, Barack said to me, go to Detroit and help fix it.
Now, Biden was sent to fix the pandemic when he was a vice president? What's going on there? People were very confused by that until the official transcript came out, and that then cleared up what he was meaning to say, which was recession, not pandemic. But here's the interesting bit. That wasn't the only mistake that he made. He actually made 9 mistakes that were all corrected in the transcript. They crossed out the word pandemic and they corrected it with recession. But also, it was another unfortunate sentence describing those who took part in the Capitol riots not as insurrectionists, but as erectionists. And also, there was a moment where Biden mistakenly claimed to have saved millions of families $800,000 per year in premiums. He then corrected himself to say, no, it was actually $8,000 a year in premiums. Well, that was wrong as well. It was actually $800 a year in premiums, and it went on. It was actually quite a comical article, all the mistakes he made. But it's also a little bit worrying for Biden because he's been really good recently on the age stuff. He's been campaigning quite vigorously. He's been getting out there. He hasn't made many gaffes. If this start, and even given that he's still behind in the polls anyway, if the gaffes start to creep in again and the old person stuff starts to happen again, then he might have a problem.
Right now, the national polls continue to point to a close election this November. Trump is 1 point ahead this week in the YouGov poll, and he's 5 points ahead in a poll from Bullfinch, which also has third-party candidates doubling their numbers over the YouGov result. Meanwhile, Joe Biden leads by 3 in the Quinnipiac poll this week. That gives Robert F. Kennedy Jr. 14%. That's important because that's just one short of what he will need to get onto the debate stage in June if he also gets that in 3 other polls and qualifies on enough ballots to get 270 hypothetical electoral college votes. So there's still a big if on all of that, but he's heading back in the right direction. Couple of points though, all of those polls are of registered voters. In recent weeks, Joe Biden has been doing much better in polls that try and filter for likely voters based on how many times in the last 8 years they've actually gone out to vote and in what kind of elections. And there's been some reporting as recently as well to suggest that Joe Biden does not believe these bad poll numbers that he's getting. He thinks that he's not just gaining on Trump, but that he's probably beating Trump. His closest advisors reportedly believe the same thing. Biden telling CNN, the polling data has been wrong all along. The theory goes that pollsters who underestimated Donald Trump's support in 2016 and 2020 have now started to oversample Trump's supporters in their modelling. That notion of the shy Trump voters, well, the idea is they're now right out in the open. I guess we'll see on that in November. But here's a group of people that Eric Trump, the president's second eldest son, said were supporting his day in court in New York this week. It was a beautiful scene pulling up back to Trump Tower. Such unbelievable love, Eric tweeted. Completely unbelievable, according to Trump biographer David K. Johnson. He tweeted out that video was actually from President Biden's visit to Manhattan in April. And given that in that footage there were no MAGA hats, there were no Trump signs, it pretty much just looked like an intersection in New York City, in fact, somewhere during peak hour when a motorcade comes through.
Yeah, and the continuing obsession with the Trump team has for crowd sizes is just so needy. They should just get over it. On the polls, though, I was just going to say, I think we are getting to the point now where national polls doesn't matter. Let's focus on the state polls. And in particular, the path is really clear. It's for Biden, it's Wisconsin, Pennsylvania and Michigan. Right now, according to the 538 average, Biden is behind by 0.5 point in Michigan. He's behind by 1.3 points in Wisconsin, and he's behind by 2 points in Pennsylvania, which he's within reach, but he's behind in all of them, and things are going, as I said, relatively well for him at the moment. Trump's on trial, and he hasn't had any major gaffes recently, Joe Biden, apart from the ones I just told you about. So he'd be wanting to be ahead by now, and he has some work to do.
And as we've said many times over the years, with the way that the popular vote works, where Democrats run up a score in big states like California and New York, Joe Biden, in order to win those battleground states, probably needs to be winning those national polls by 4 or 5 points. So that's where they are kind of still an interesting barometer. If Biden is behind in the national polls, he is certainly going to be behind in those states that matter. Now, the spring and summer used to be the best of times in Ukraine after a long cold winter. The fertile soils thaw and the fields are full again with the crops that once made Ukraine the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. But now, of course, the warmer weather also means it's easier to move troops and tanks and artillery. And after making steady progress in recent months, Russian forces have been making further gains towards Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. And they also know, the Russians do, that this is a limited window because there's going to be billions of dollars worth of American ammunition and other military supplies flowing back into Ukraine soon. But this week, analysts at the think tank, the Institute for the Study of War, wrote that the US decision to resume aid in late April and Europe's increasing efforts to mobilise support for Ukraine marked the failure of Russia's effort to convince the West to accept Russian victory. They also write that Putin has likely concluded that weakening Western support for Ukraine over time is a valid theory of victory for him and will likely continue efforts to convince the West to surrender and allow Russia to destroy Ukrainian statehood, possibly with a thought towards a possible second Trump administration there. The current US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has just returned to Washington, D.C. from another visit to Kyiv last week. And he's returned to what the New York Times is referring to as a vigorous debate inside the Biden administration over whether to allow the Ukrainians to hit missile and artillery launch sites just over the border in Russia. Targets that Zelensky says have enabled Moscow's recent territorial gains. But until now, the Times reports that President Zelensky had to agree to never fire American-supplied weapons into Russian territory, insisting that that would violate the Biden mandate to avoid World War III, which is certainly, it sounds like a good idea. For more on the situation in Ukraine right now and the changing dynamics with Washington, D.C. as well, we spoke this week to Ukrainian journalist and anthropologist Alisa Sopova, who's in Australia as a guest of the Sydney Writers' Festival. Alisa, welcome. Good to have you here. What is your current assessment of, we've heard in recent weeks about Russia making advances in the Kharkiv area and so on, this sense that maybe some of that military aid that was delayed in America has been a little bit too late in coming. What are you hearing on the ground?
Well, so the way most experts talk about this war now, it's a war of attrition, which means that if the war doesn't end within several months, it becomes not as much just about military tactics and strategy, but about the economies of both countries and the kind of large-scale management of being able to accumulate as many resources as possible for the next push and to deprive the other side of their resources. Mm-hmm. So I generally hate to take this like God's eye view, top-down view on the war. But if we have to take that view, it kind of reminds of a perfect, chess tournament, because each side, as we've seen it since the beginning, each side takes a turn and everybody knows whose turn this is. And then it takes some time to make the move and everybody is kind of watching and waiting for this move, right? So right now it's Russia's turn to make a move and everybody is watching and Russia is on the offensive and it's moving a little bit. I think also every time one side takes a turn, there is a lot of atmosphere and media about this side currently winning. Mm-hmm. So when it was Ukrainian counteroffensive last summer, there was this expectation that Russia will fall and Ukraine will win. And now when it's Russia's turn to go for offensive, there is this air that, now Russia is winning. But I think, on one hand, it's been very predictable because we know who is taking turns. But on the other hand, it's been very unpredictable because every move doesn't really end the way we expect it to end. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, everybody expected Russia to just win immediately. It didn't. Then everybody expected Ukraine to win in the counteroffensive. It didn't. So maybe now that when it's Russia's time to make its move, it does not necessarily mean that Russia is going to win the whole war. We obviously hope it's not happening this way. But it's hard to say how it will end. So speaking of this war of attrition, we can say that Russia does have advantage in it because Russia is just bigger. It has more resources, more people to throw into the battle, and more territory. So, for example, Russia managed to produce its own weapons because it can be far enough where Ukraine cannot reach it. And also Ukraine has all restrictions on shooting missiles to Russian territory, while Russia can reach pretty much every target in Ukraine. So it's been much harder for Ukraine to establish production of weapons, and Ukraine largely depends on its Western partners for that. So this is where we are now, but where we will get from here, nobody knows, and I don't know either, right?
If you're drawing an analogy with a chess game where each one's taking a turn, that would suggest to me that you're seeing this as taking many years. This won't be resolved in 6 months or in 12 months. This might be 5 years. This might be 6 years. Is that how you're seeing it?
Yes, and I personally don't think it will be resolved very soon, or soon at all.
We're 2 and a bit years since the Russian invasion, 10 years though since the Russian annexation of Crimea, which I suppose really began this cycle of aggression. What is your perception of how the Ukrainian people are feeling right now? Is the mood still one of defiance, or are they feeling as though maybe sacrifices will need to be made to end this phase of the conflict, which could mean giving up land in the east particularly?
So I think something that many people outside Ukraine don't understand is that the deal of land for peace that is often offered, suggested Ukrainians should take, that it's really not on the table. And it's a non-viable deal not for Ukraine but for Russia, because this is not land that Russia wants. First of all, the land that they take, it's mostly a scorched land that they burn to ground before they take. It's more of liability than a gain. But even outside of that, Russia has never been interested in some piece of Ukrainian territory. Russia is interested in regime change in Ukraine, in having Ukraine under its control. And so I myself come from the city of Donetsk that has been occupied by Russia since 2014. And I know very well what it is like to live under Russian control. It can be most closely compared to living in North Korea or in the Soviet Union in its really bad times. So basically, for Ukrainians, it's not really a peace. It's not really something to go for.
Alisa, what do you make of the pro-Russian sentiment that seems to be becoming increasingly popular in Republican conservative circles in the United States? We've even had senators in the last week, Tommy Tuberville, saying America provoked Russia to invade Ukraine by trying to draw Ukraine into the Western sphere of influence and away from Russia, and that we're not doing Ukraine any favours by supporting them continuing a war that will just claim more and more Ukrainian as well as Russian lives. What do you think is going on there, and how suspicious are you of Russian influence over conservative politics in the United States now?
Okay. So first of all, something I learned in these 10 years is that whatever is happening in Ukraine or elsewhere, everybody in big politics will just interpret it the way that works for them. So whether it's true to what's on the ground or not, it doesn't really make a difference, because it's just being turned around in this way. I think that generally Russian, not to say that Russia doesn't try to mess with right-wing politics everywhere in Europe and America, but I also don't want to over-exaggerate this influence, because I think they try, but I don't think they have as much of an impact as many people would like to believe. Because I think for many Americans, it kind of absolves them of the responsibility to say that, oh, it's not people in our country, it's Putin who made Trump president in 2016. Well, guys, Russia tried to do something with that, but I'm pretty sure Trump would win without Russia as well. Yeah, I think it's about taking responsibility. I think Russia tries to influence this politics, but I don't think they have as much power or influence to kind of to give them too much credit for that.
Do you think Ukrainians feel betrayed by America's dilly-dallying when it comes to support, or do you think they're just grateful for the support they've gotten to this point?
Well, I think it's both. Of course, they're grateful for the support. Also, I think many Ukrainians don't like when the support is being framed as some kind of charity, because we should not forget that Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal in exchange for protection, and they didn't get this protection in 2014. And there is this kind of responsibility to actually support Ukraine. And I don't know about betrayal. I think Ukrainians are still very hopeful, but there is a lot of anxiety about help coming too late, or being not sufficient, or being inconsistent.
We've heard a bit in the American media about corruption in Ukraine. How big of a problem do you think it is?
Well, corruption it's not just a problem, it's kind of a part of Ukrainian reality. It's always been and it remains so. I'm afraid that at this point, corruption is becoming kind of a justification to not really help Ukraine. You know, and I think we should understand that these are two separate things. Yes, there is degree of corruption in Ukrainian politics. It's gotten better actually compared to 10 years or whatnot ago. But at the same time, Ukrainians are being really courageous and self-sacrificing and fighting and doing all that. And we should separate these two facts because I think there is a tendency to expect that the victim has to be perfect in all ways and highly moral. You know, and then this victim deserves of help and empathy and everything only as long as they maintain this like holy appearance. So I often hear these impressions from like my American friends and colleagues going to Ukraine and then coming back and saying, "Oh my God, I didn't expect that, but Ukrainians like they actually I heard somebody making like homophobic remark." And we are helping them. Like, yes, of course, you're helping them not because of homophobia or whatnot. You're helping them because they're fighting the war. So, yes, there is corruption in Ukraine. No, I don't think that it should impact the support to Ukraine. Ukraine should be supported because it fights this war, not because it has a perfect, perfect absence of homophobia and because it's perfectly liberal in all senses.
Alisa, my final question is about how the future looks for the people of Ukraine. Given that in this period, since Crimea happened a decade ago and since the invasion of 2 and a bit years ago, there's also been it seems from the outside, a change in Ukrainian sense of self, understanding of recent history, including the millions who died in the 1930s as a result of Russian Soviet policies to starve the people of Ukraine during the Holodomor and so on. There's a lot of reasons for Ukrainians to hate Russians now. Whatever happens in the future, you will be neighbours, whether there is a pro-Russian government in Ukraine or not. What does that anger and resentment and knowledge of the persecution they have suffered at the hands of the Russians mean for the Ukrainian people and their own future?
Well, I can answer this question from two different positions, you know. As a private Ukrainian citizen positioned in time right now, it seems like there is no way we can ever reconcile with Russia and it will be impossible to live next to each other anymore. That's what many Ukrainians say. As kind of, if I assume the position of an outside observer, you know, an aspiring scholar, you know, from the United States, I would say that let's look at Europe. They've been murdering each other for decades, and look at them now. They live perfectly well together, right? I've been exposed a lot to former Yugoslavia. It's been just like 20, 30 years, and there is still a lot of tension. But I went last summer to Croatia, and there was just in my block, there were tourists from all the former Yugoslavia countries getting drunk together every night, being very happy. And it seemed like there was, like 90s never happened. I know it's not that it's not true, but it seems like it's impossible to reconcile. And then you look at examples like this, and you see that sometimes it just takes a few decades. And people manage to find, especially in like next generations. Of course, it will help if something changes in Russia. And, of course, we all look at Germany, and if Russia went through such transformation as Germany did, of course, that would help. Many people say that for Russia, the war with Ukraine could be what Algerian war was for France, that it could make them realize that colonialism doesn't work anymore and you should try to do something else. So if such kind of a big shift happened in Russia, I think that would definitely help in the future for us to reconcile. But as I said, again, like as a private citizen, I cannot imagine reconciliation. As a kind of outside observer looking at the history of other cases, I see that it should be perfectly possible in theory.
Well, Alisa Sopova, thank you very much indeed for having a fireside chat with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. By this time next week, we could know whether Donald Trump, the first former American president to face criminal charges in a court, has become the first ever to become a convicted felon. Closing statements are expected from both prosecution and defence attorneys early next week, and then it's going to be up to the jury to decide whether Trump falsified business records to cover up hush money payments to a porn star, which helped him win the 2016 election. So far, though, of course, very little evidence that voters are too fussed whether he did or not. Some polls suggest that a conviction could turn some of them off Trump. Meanwhile, even though the most cut and dried charges against Trump, the Florida classified documents cases, basically ground to a halt thanks to the Trump-appointed judge Eileen Cannon's rather conspicuous lack of urgency through the pre-trial process, shall we say, it's still generating a lot of controversy. Exhibit A, this post from former President Donald Trump this week.
Wow, I just came out of the Biden witch hunt trial in Manhattan. The icebox that was showing reports that crooked Joe Biden's DOJ and their illegal and unconstitutional raid of Mar-a-Lago authorized the FBI to use deadly lethal force. Now we know for sure that Joe Biden is a serious threat to democracy. He is mentally unfit to hold office. 25th Amendment.
Calling for the removal of Joe Biden, and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene went even further, claiming credit for tipping Trump off. And then she alleged the Biden Department of Justice and FBI were planning to assassinate President Trump and gave the green light. Well, that's pretty wild, even for Jewish space laser Marjorie, claiming a high-level plot to kill Donald Trump. And it is, fortunately, quite easy to debunk. First of all, Trump was not at Mar-a-Lago at the time of the FBI raid. That was already well known to all parties. Also, there's nothing unusual about the FBI's agents' rules of engagement, it turns out.
The FBI released this statement saying it followed protocol. It's standard for search warrants to include a standard policy limiting the use of deadly force. The statement says no one ordered additional steps be taken, and there was no departure from the norm.
So, nothing to see here, Chaz, except that a member of Congress has said that President Biden tried to assassinate President Trump. That's where we're up to in 2024.
Yeah. Yes, it is, sadly. And look, at what you said is correct. It's worth emphasising. Literally, they just reprinted word for word the policy on deadly force. Which they do in literally every single operations order.
So this
for a
is
search
completely
warrant.
standard.
It's just pro forma standard. They do it in every search warrant, including Joe Biden's search warrant. Jackie Heinrich from Fox News was told that the use of deadly force was also included in the operations order for the searches at President Biden's residences in Delaware. And we should also emphasise that pro forma language, most of it, is saying what they can't do. It's not saying, hey, go and shoot whoever you like. It's saying you're not allowed to shoot someone who's running away from you. You're not allowed to shoot someone who is harming themselves. You're not allowed to fire a warning shot. You're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z. It's restricting them. Because you know what? The FBI, they have guns. They can shoot a lot of people. But this order is saying, no, you can't shoot lots of people. So that is actually, it's actually trying to protect people. So that's an important point to make.
Yeah, so this is misinformation now that is being spread, and it's not coming from an anonymous meme-generating, far-right factory.
No.
This is coming from a presidential candidate and a member of Congress. Little wonder that a certain number of people are now going to believe that Joe Biden is trying to kill Donald Trump, with goodness knows what implications for the safety of Joe Biden as well.
There's a very good point. In fact, I can tell you exactly where this came from. I can tell you the person that came from, because it's the same person who spreads a lot of this misinformation. Her name is Julie Kelly. Okay, and Julie Kelly is, I don't even know if she's a lawyer, to be honest. She certainly doesn't act like she's a lawyer with the views she comes out with. She scrutinises legal documents all the time for the right, and then she expresses usually panicked, incorrect opinions about them, and then they become the truth, because Trump inevitably amplifies them, and the right just accept it as a fact.
Like conspiracy theorists with no understanding of structural engineering going through engineers' reports about the 9/11 attack and saying, aha, it's impossible that these buildings came down, it must have been an inside job.
Exactly. So in this example, I can point to you the tweet where this began. This was her tweet, where she included the use of deadly force order, and she said that the FBI risked the lives of Donald Trump for a publicity stunt to make it look like Trump stole national security files. People need to be arrested for this. Now, I can't emphasise enough that this is the opposite of the truth. They actually went out of their way to make sure this wasn't the case. As you suggested before, when the raid occurred, they actually made sure Trump was in New York, not in Palm Beach. They actually made sure of that. They contacted the Secret Service, gave them a heads up hours in advance.
They contacted Ron DeSantis to say, Governor, we've got a raid in Florida in the morning you should know about.
Totally. They didn't come in brandishing guns. They were wearing white polo shirts and khakis, not the usual FBI uniforms. They were trying to create a lack of panic. So it's the direct opposite of what they're talking about.
Although, to be fair, assassins would play it cool like that.
It's true. That's what they want us to think. But look, and you can see where this is coming from. You can see why Trump would want to emphasise this, because he's trying to run a counter program to Biden's campaign message of Trump's a danger to democracy. He's trying to argue that Biden is a danger to democracy. And every chance he gets to elevate some misinformation or to twist something around to try and make that case, he will. So literally, he's already put this in an ad.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
We were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
The RNC headquarters had to go into lockdown. Just a while earlier this morning, there was a suspicious package delivered.
Suspicious package found near the Republican National Committee headquarters contained 2 vials of blood.
Take one to no one?
They're angry people. They are so angry people.
The Biden administration authorizing the use of deadly force during the FBI's raid on former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in August of 2022.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. It's about the power we have in our own hands to meet these threats.
Finally, John, we should actually note, we just spent so much time on this ridiculous non-story that's garbage. We should note there was an actual story amongst all those document dumps.
Yep.
It wasn't the biggest story on earth, but it's worth noting. And that is one of the things that got dumped amongst these documents was something that was sealed until now. It was a document that showed that actually the FBI discovered more classified documents in Trump's bedroom months after the Mar-a-Lago raid. It was about 4 months later. It was only 4 documents, but still...
Hidden under a pile of silk pyjamas.
I don't know where they found it, but they didn't find it the first time, and Trump didn't hand them in, and they were still there 4 months later. They found more classified documents, but this one's... one of these classified documents, there was a special element to it, which was an unnamed witness scanned and saved those confidential documents onto a laptop to spread. And that laptop was owned by Save America PAC. They are Trump's super PAC. So they are not protected by any executive privilege for sure. They've got nothing to do with
So somebody's spreading national secrets around.
Exactly. So that is a potential... We're getting into a whole new world of illegal when we're talking about that. So we might be hearing about that again.
Yeah, or maybe it all goes away in November. You never know. But that is it for another Fireside Chat. Join us for Planet America on Wednesday night on ABC TV at 10 p.m. and 9 p.m. on ABC iView and YouTube.
And don't forget to pep the Planet Extra podcast in all the very best pod places. See you later.